The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame. Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I am Raygan Kelly, and I am joined by all of my fabulous co-hosts.
Nate Heininger.
Laura Nash.
And Shane Kelly.
And this is the Game of the Year.
Aw, yeah, 2019.
The game of the decade.
Nope.
No, we're not doing that.
False.
We're not doing that. But we are doing the game of 2019, or we're going to attempt to. It might be harder for us this year than it has been in previous years. We're changing up our format for our Game of the Year discussion this year because in preparing for this, we've realized that our individual lists are much more divergent from each other than they typically have been in the past. You know, we've had occasional disagreements, but we've always been able to come together and select a single Game of the Year, or I think in one case we selected two.
Couple cases, yep.
Yeah, but this year, I don't really know how this is going to go. So, as opposed to...
I think this is going to split up the band. This is going to be our Yoko.
Oh, no. 2019 was our Yoko. I think in the years past, I do think just for the show this year, we were a little more... even though we really significantly upped our output and we finally landed a consistent release date. But I think that also meant that we were not all on every single episode. And so when I look at some of the lists that you all were made, it's like, oh, some of those are games that I was not able to do. So we covered more games this year, but it also meant that less of us were on every single episode. And we did try to pick, whenever we do these, I think it's important to note that we pick from the games that we covered on the show, at least for our short game of the year piece. We'll talk about games that we liked outside of that, but it does limit what we pick. It's really just the games we covered. So I wasn't on like Baba Is You, which was a popular game. I didn't play that, right? So I think that's part of why we're a little more divergent this year.
Yeah, and that's fine. I think this is going to be an interesting discussion. It just might mean that we have to do... I might need to do a little more bullying of all of the rest of you for us to come together on a single game that I select, right?
4 short games of the year. I'm not kidding.
People are waiting
time
for
will
this.
tell.
Yeah.
At the
Time will
end of
tell.
this episode.
We're gonna have to know who to send the 14-foot tall trophy that we make every year and send to the Short Game of the Year studio.
I mean, we're just going to have to send all of those games into the cage. Only one of them can emerge. The rest of them bloodied, destroyed. They'll be going home to their mothers in hospitals.
Each one gets a 3-foot tall trophy. Done.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yes.
And a smaller novelty size check.
Yes. So our process this episode is going to basically be to each share our own individual list. For the interest of time, we're limiting it to 5. We're going to talk about what our selections are for our short games of the year. Where there's overlap, we're going to try not to do too much duplication of talking, but that's going to be our approach. And then we're going to try and bring it together for a try to hash it out towards the end. Looking forward to talking about it with all of you. And should I go first?
Let's jump in. Raygan, take us off.
All right, so this was a very, very difficult year, and I should say that, there was a lot of horse trading. I had to disqualify a couple of things. I'll explain those as I go. So, and also there were a bunch of things that just barely got pushed off of since we're limiting ourselves to 5, my list ran much longer than that, so a few very good games got pushed just below the fold. But
I'm not going to limit myself to 5.
hey, I do the edit. I make the rules. And
We
you're
have
limited
a
to 5.
Shane, this is a podcast. We have rules.
Yes, all podcasts have rules. So the number 5 on my personal Game of the Year list of short games would be Ape Out. Ape Out is one of my favorite sort of purely action-focused games I've played on the Nintendo Switch. It's available on other platforms too, but that's where I played it, and I just thought that was a really fun experience. It's got beautiful Saul Bass style art. It's got a really, really cool reactive soundtrack where every action you take becomes a part of the percussion track of a sort of an improvisational jazz album that you're creating along with the game. It's extremely violent, but in a way that kind of abstracts that violence to make it cool and not gory or distressing. It's just a really super fun game, and Ape Out would be my number 5. Anybody have anything to say about? I mean, I'm sure Ape Out is on some of your lists too.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, it's even higher on my list. I'm a huge lover of this game. It made it really high on my list because one of the things that will really pull me into a game really quick is like accessible arcade action.
Mhm.
And if you can do that in a really stylized way that has that level of like, that brings together that gameplay, good gameplay, which it has, with kind of beautiful visuals and a terrific score. It really is hard to beat that kind of a game. I mean, there are a lot of games out there that shoot for that, but Ape Out did all of the above, and it did it in a really original way, and in a way that I keep introducing people to that game. I keep sharing it with people. It's a great one.
So Ape Out is really interesting to me because it is one of my most recommended games of the year because it works for people who want a very visually arresting game. It's very easy to learn, even though it gets super hard. It's funny. It's got all this action, but also I've been able to recommend it to a more hardcore long-term gamer who like doesn't really like A Night in the Woods and thinks that's kind of like really indie bullshit. Ape Out works. So I think Ape Out is my most versatile recommendation of the year by far.
That's a really good point.
Also, I 100%ed it.
Nice.
Very
Before,
nice.
my recommendation was always Super Hot for a game that like anybody who's a gamer, I think, would appreciate it. Ape Out is right up there with Super Hot for me now. For exactly your point, Laura. I think anyone who's into video games can pick this game up and be like, hell yeah.
Is it one of the most innovative shovers you've ever played?
Yes, absolutely.
People who hate
Nice.
shooters still like Ape Out, and it's wild to me because shooters require some precision, and this one's just shoving. So, like,
Yeah.
people who like violent games but aren't good at FPS, Ape Out
Here
is
you
like
go.
their game.
I just also appreciate a game that really goes for a tone and a style. This is a style piece as much as it is a arcade game, and everything clicks. It is a complete package of mayhem, and I love this game. It's also very high on my list.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it much more than I expected to. So, looking at my list, like I'll tell you a little bit about some of the things that didn't quite make it once we get through this, and putting the list together was sort of illuminating for me because some of the decision making that came out of it actually ended up I ended up kind of being surprised by my own opinions in a way, if that makes sense. It's sort of surprising to me, but like, hey, here it is. Ape Out, yeah, actually really good game that ended up near, on number 5. Next up from that would be Creature in the Well. This is a theme on the short game, is that I ended up putting a pinball-based game really high on my list that none of the rest of you guys put on your lists, which is okay.
I put Yoko in. last year.
Yeah, that's right. Yoku was
it just you?
Yoku was really, really good. I think Creature in the Well is a phenomenal game. It was very hard. There were times in that game where I was absolutely cursing at it in just absolute lengthy screeds of really, truly inventive curse words. But it's also just extremely clever. And I just had an incredibly great time playing it. I would recommend people go back and listen to our episode on it. The very short version is that it plays like a sort of top-down dungeon crawler where instead of hitting enemies with your swords essentially become paddles or bumpers in a kind of a massive pinball table, or it actually plays quite a bit more like things like Breakout because you're mostly trying to hit targets and progressing through a dungeon by clearing rooms, by batting balls around. And it's got a lot of really, really good ideas. It's not perfect, but for me, the pinball style mechanics just really, really resonate. So I had to put this on my list because this, pinball stuff, I love it.
Yeah, this is a great game. It didn't quite make my list. I don't think I connect with pinball as much as you do, but as far as we talk a lot about, and I just said it on Ape Out, but this like complete package of like a gameplay mechanic that wouldn't work on a 40-hour game, but is perfect for a 6 to 8 hour game.
Yeah.
This is like exactly that thing, right? This is a perfect example of a short game that understands its mechanic, builds on it, makes it harder and harder and harder, and then ends before you're like, I am sick of this, right? It's a really cool game.
Yeah. Continuing up my list in the number 3 position is Anodyne 2. And this is another example of, I think, where our lists this year are perhaps a little more divergent than in past years. Anodyne 2 is a landmark game for me. Like, this was an extraordinarily good game. It took everything that I liked about Anodyne 1, which we had been out for years, but we finally got around to playing very early in the year. I think like around March or so, we ended up playing Anodyne 1, and we have an episode on that. And I liked that quite a bit, but I had some complaints. Then finally Anodyne 2 came out, and I was absolutely blown away by it. It's got this incredible sort of mix of the Zelda-style dungeons, but scaled down to make them extremely digestible, like really streamlined Zelda-style dungeon crawling that is just has all of the fun and none of the occasional frustrations of the sort of 2D Zelda style, but also has this really extraordinarily weird 3D overworld that connected with me so much because it reminded me of these 3D games of the 32-bit era, the like PS1 and Saturn. And not just the graphics. There were things about that game that just sort of felt extremely I really connected with it. And it also had like more going on than the first Anodyne, more characters, more story. I thought it was just an extraordinarily well done game and had really impactful moments in it. And I cannot recommend it enough. And I know that I think I was probably the strongest cheerleader for this game on this show.
We nicknamed you the Fanodyne.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Nice.
You would wear that. You'd wear a hoodie with Fanodyne.
Oh yeah. I'm totally okay with that. But like, damn guys, this game, it's really, really good. And I'm kind of bummed that more people didn't seem to have played it or enjoyed it. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it once we've been, down in the Game of the Year territory. So if you missed Anodyne 2, you don't need to have played Anodyne 1 at all to play and enjoy Anodyne 2. And it's one of the best action RPGs I've ever played. It's extremely like in the short game territory for length. And it's also just extraordinarily weird and full of inventive stuff. Go back and listen to our episode on it. I gush there, but I really, really loved this game, and I'm extraordinarily happy to have played it in 2019.
Yeah, Raygan, I completely agree. I didn't put it on my list for this, but you're convincing me to maybe throw it on there because I really enjoyed this game as well. I think during the time of recording, I had not been able to get all the way through it, so that's probably colored a little bit of my experience with it. Whereas you played all the way
that
through
happens.
it.
That happens sometimes a lot with this show. Is like,
yeah,
two of us will have finished a game, and then two of us will be at various other states of doneness with it by the time we get down to recording, and that's fine. And sometimes we go back and finish those things, and sometimes we don't, and that's okay too.
I will say that sort of the mood and the tone of that game has definitely stuck with me, and I do think about that game more than a lot of the other games that we've done this year. So it definitely there's the only other games that I've played that have the same tone that game has is the other games by the makers of Anodyne 2, Anodyne 1, and even The Ocean are the games that I've played by them. And they have a definite style, it's like an auteur style of game making, right? And I really, really appreciate it. I think it connects a little bit more with you than it does with me, but I really appreciate what they go for. And the writing is just unlike any other game. And I, of course, love and appreciate good video game writing.
Yeah, it's really something. And it feels like a very complete experience. Not that these other games don't, but something about this, when I think back on this game, I think of it like, wow, that was really a complete package that included a lot of interesting stuff that connected together well, but still sort of a diverse package.
Did not even make my top 12.
Dang.
Sorry you didn't.
Well, that's only your third game. What could be better? What could be better than that? What's your second one?
Well, Nate, I'm glad you asked. The second item on my list, the number 2 game on my Game of the Year list, is A Short Hike. And
Short Hike.
This is a game that we didn't really do a full episode on. So you might be, if you hear that name, you might think, well, I thought they were sticking only to games that they covered on the show. Well, listener, you clearly missed Bird Week, the best episode we did all year.
Yep.
The Bird Week episode featured a bunch of games that I wouldn't look back at again for any reason, and A Short Hike. And A Short Hike is, I think, one of the most short games ever. I mean, it's extraordinarily short. I mean, it's not like 3 minutes exactly or anything, but I think I completed the whole game, including a lot of optional stuff, in under 2 hours. And it's a lovely story. If you didn't listen to the Bird Week episode, or maybe you skipped out of it before we talked about A Short Hike, A Short Hike is a lovely little game about, it's very Animal Crossing, or sort of Animal Crossing meets Night in the Woods. So the story of A Short Hike, you're playing as this sort of bird character, in a world of animal people, right? Very Animal Crossing. And you have gone out, presumably you've left the city, and you're going out to this cabin to visit an aunt, and you're staying in this very rustic place with no cell phone reception. And it's clear that through very subtle ways that it doesn't, it's clear that the main character, the bird, is kind of troubled in some way and is stressed out about not having cell phone reception. And your short hike is basically to get to the top of the mountain at the center of this island that you're staying on to get some cell phone reception. And along the way, you meet all sorts of different characters, and you have the option to do things for them in a very sort of Animal Crossing-y or maybe sort of like light RPG-y kind of way. And all of the characters are really funny and interesting, and actually, like, I actually had an emotional connection with them as characters in ways that I wasn't expecting for a game this sort of brief and streamlined. But it also has really fun mechanics. Like, you start out just able to jump and do a very slight glide, but as you go, you're constantly collecting new objects and abilities, things like the ability to climb, things like buckets and shovels and sticks and other stuff that you use in all sorts of different ways. You add a lot of new verbs over the course of the couple of hours max that you play this game, climbing this mountain, trying to find ways to expand your ability to climb or have a longer hover time when you jump. So all of the movement in it is actually really fun. And it's really just about this sort of persistent joy of trying to go on a hike, explore a really interesting 3D space. It's also a beautiful game. It has this really unique, striking aesthetic that is kind of like low poly models with a really nice sort of light color scheme that looks very I would say it's sort of like a low poly models with color scheme that seems sort of pulled from watercolor, but with seen through a kind of a pixelated filter, as if you were looking at it on an old school computer monitor or something like that. And it's hard to really express why it's so beautiful, but it's really just a truly emotional and fun to play and beautiful game that I really, really loved. If you liked Animal Crossing, but want to do something other than collect furniture in that world, this is that. And it's lovely.
So I will be talking a little more about Short Hike later, since I had it very high on my list and I played it super recently. But I think that, this is a game that I had marked as like, I will love this. I need to play this before end of year. And I literally played it in the last 2 days. So recency bias be damned. This game is incredible. And I think that it's definitely worth time sunk into it. It's wonderfully earnest and optimistic. I've mentally compared it to like a much more earnest Night of the Woods, and I've compared it to like it's Breath of the Wild, but it's like 3 hours if you mess around, like because
Absolutely.
There's so much. Yeah, it's a small space, and you have just as much climbing and exploration, and fishing. They added fishing.
Yep.
I don't know if fishing was in the game when you played it, Raygan, but definitely fished quite a bit. It's a very charming game, but it also feels like a bit of a break. Like it's supposed to be a mental break while you're trying to prep to do this phone call, and it definitely feels like one to play it.
Yeah, it's lovely. And the final game that I will put as my number one short game of the year, and I know I'm probably the only one with this in their top 5, but that's okay, is Manifold Garden. Manifold Garden is a game that I've been looking forward to for many years. I first played it at a preview in 2015, and it had already been in development for a very long time at that point. So it's a game that I've been following the development of for years and years, and was really looking forward to, and it did not disappoint me. It was absolutely one of my favorite games of 2019. I'm a little bit worried that it's getting overlooked in this period, in this Game of the Year period, for a couple of reasons. One is that it launched exclusively on the PC, on the Epic Game Store, and via Apple Arcade. And that has put, I think, a lot of people in a position where they don't have a great way to have an optimal experience playing this game. It's coming to PlayStation 4 in 2020, and so I'm hoping that's where a lot of people will check it out. But basically, if you're playing it today, you have a choice between playing it on your Apple computer or tablet or phone, and none of those are really a great experience because this game is beautiful, but it's a first-person game with beautiful sort of line art shaded graphics that don't necessarily look or their best on most of those Apple platforms, despite the fact that, hey, if you have an Apple Arcade subscription, you can just download this game and try it. But it's not an absolutely ideal experience there. And then the Windows version is exclusive to the Epic Game Store, and I know some people have their issues there. It's absolutely the first time in years that a first-person puzzle game has really excited me. I've tried other, in the wake of Portal, I've played a lot of games that are doing the first-person spatial 3D puzzle game thing. I've played, Cube and things like that, and there's a lot of them, and the names of those games that I have played in that genre are escaping me now. None of them have done for me what Portal did. This has, for me, I thought, even more interesting puzzle mechanics than Portal. It doesn't have the humor of Portal, but it doesn't need it because it's instead one of the most visually beautiful games I have ever played. And it gets more and more visually interesting the longer it goes, to the point where I will say that the final moments of this game, when it sort of fractally implodes, is one of the most striking things I've ever seen. It's just absolutely astonishing to look at. So I 100% recommend Manifold Garden. I'll very, very quickly say that the things that were on my list that I had to strike out, Outer Wilds, Laura and I discussed this earlier. I already mentioned, and we've decided that Outer Wilds would be my number one game of the year, but it is too long to represent the short game. So it is a wonderful game. Go back and listen to our episode on it. Outer Wilds is absolutely my long game of the year, but it is not my short game of the year. And for similar reasons, we also struck out Heaven's Vault, which would have been probably my number 4. Both excellent games. I also wanted to very briefly call out Micro Mages would be my retro homebrew game of the year for a variety of reasons. This is the game. This is a year where I played a lot of homebrew games for old consoles, and Micro Mages is absolutely great. We did an episode on it. If you have the means to play an NES game in 2019, go check out Micro Mages. It's absolutely great.
Yeah, and that makes it sound harder than it is because you can play it on any ROM on your. I played it on my iMac. Right. So I played it multiplayer on my iMac. That was a really fun game. I agree.
Yeah, it's absolutely great and really astonishing piece of programming, because really great modern feeling game that runs in a handful of bytes on the NES. And probably my mobile game of the year would be Grindstone. I spent way too long playing Grindstone this year, and it's still what's justifying.
That's on some of our actual lists, buddy.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine then. Keep it there, and I endorse that. So who?
Yeah, hands off, says Shane.
Yes, Shane. Do you want to take over?
Sure. I will start off with my number 6 because I don't think it's actually on anybody else's list. And that is the game Telling Lies. That game really worked for me on the level of like the acting and directing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We've played the previous game.
Her Story.
What's it called?
Her Story.
Telling
Her Story.
Truths.
Her Story.
A Lady's Story.
Did Shane mute me? Her Story.
Her Story.
That's the one. And that one didn't really work as well for me. This one had a slightly tweaked structure, and I felt like a better, more complete story that you could kind of actually feel like you were finishing the game. And the interface and kind of frame story around it were both really, really good. I would actually recommend this game to a lot of people. I think I called it my most bingeable game of the year. And that one was one where I honestly can't recommend enough. If you have like a tablet and a significant other and it's cold, snuggle up and try and solve this mystery together in bed. It's beautiful. It's a good time. My number 5, no one told me I could not put a board game. So I am putting Wingspan at number 5.
Huh. Okay.
Wingspan.
Another Bird Week game.
Yeah.
Another Bird Week game. Wingspan is a tremendous board game. It's a kind of board game that's usually very unapproachable and inaccessible, turned into something that, through both its theming and its rules, is incredibly accessible. It's one of the most beautiful board games that's out there. If you buy it, you're buying a beautifully designed board game, but also more than 100 little beautiful pieces of art. The game is getting its first expansion really soon, which is going to add the Birds of Europe, which I'm very excited about. So that is my number 5 game of the year.
Oh, on the topic of Wingspan, Elizabeth Hargrove, who's the designer of it, is an excellent Twitter follow. I haven't played Wingspan personally myself because I haven't had a chance to get it. It was sold out when I wanted to grab it. And I don't think it's right for my family, so I'm holding off for Christmas. They've got little kids who are not going to they're going to more likely like to draw on the cards than to awe at the cards. But I think Wingspan, every single person I know who's played it adores it. It's like the number 1 hit of the year. It's showing up everywhere on like science podcasts. Like everyone loves Wingspan. So you're in good company, Shane, even if we didn't put it on our lists.
Absolutely. Even friend of the show, Mark Bramhill has actually gone and interviewed the creator of Wingspan. So you can catch the details on BirdNote. My number 4 game of the year is one of the most addicting games I've played this year. It is Grindstone. I am a sucker for a match 3 puzzle game.
Same.
This is by Capybara Games, who have made one of my previous all-time favorite match 3 or kind of color matching puzzle games, which was Critter Crunch. and they haven't really dipped into that genre in a long time. I know a game is really good if like I can recommend it to a bunch of people and then I'll spot them playing it on their phones, and that's been the case for me with Grindstone. Even people who I thought would be put off by the theme, like because you are like a gross little dude carving your way through an ocean of cute little colorful blob creatures with a giant sword, and like viscera flies everywhere. So it's both cute and horrifying at once, which is that's an aesthetic, sure. But the thing that I think is great about Grindstone is that it has a series of levels that's going to take people a long time to get through, but it's a very quick playing one-handed game, right? And almost every playthrough, every time you pick up the game, you're probably going to get through a level, maybe two, especially early on. And literally every single one of those is going to be showing you something different. It's constantly adding new mechanics or new enemies or new layouts to the level. And I don't know, it's an incredibly satisfying, quick playing time waster game that gives back to you in terms of depth. Like you're never gonna feel like you've totally wasted time screwing around in Grindstone. It's exactly the kind of game where I have a little side list, by the way, of like my honorable mention mobile games. There are a few mobile games that I played this year that we never wound up actually covering because we kept talking about doing like an Apple Arcade episode, and I played a bunch of these.
Still might.
We still might. Well, I'll still mention them here in the timely fashion for the year.
No, go for it.
So I'm going to take a segue here at Grindstone, my number 4 game, to talk about my 3 special mobile mentions. Number 1 is Mini Motorways. This is the sequel to a terrific mobile game that I never had the chance to play, but it's a traffic management puzzle / simulator. It's a very light simulator or a very simulatory puzzly game. And I kind of binged this one while I was on some airplanes this year. I absolutely I cannot get enough of this game. I hope they add more levels and stuff to it. It's a very simple game to play, but it really makes you think about like, traffic planning and stuff like that. It's very, very cool. And it also has that great pick up and play feel. The second one is one that I hope Raygan is getting into. I have recently completed this one called Pinball Wizard. Raygan,
yes.
Have you tried Pinball Wizard?
I have, yeah. I played a good bit of it. I don't love the way that it handles like progression, because it stacks up the floor. You're climbing a tower, and each floor of the tower is kind of like a mini pinball table, and they get progressively more complicated as you go. I don't love its design for some of the pinball layouts. Its physics don't feel right to me, and also I don't love the way that it handles progression. But I like a lot about it. This has been a year where I've had some options for pinball games. So I am always in favor of pinball meets X or Y. So I have some issues with it, which is why I didn't really make my list and I didn't really stick with it. But I did enjoy it quite a bit.
Yeah, for me, Pinball Wizard had that same kind of pick up and play feel that you can have with a mobile game. It works really well if you have a phone with haptics, and the kind of the play from there is really nice. And I liked the way it handled a lot of the basic pinball mechanics. It's a lot closer to a stock pinball kind of experience than the other pinball-esque games that we've played this year. So I'm a big fan of that one. The last game on my little special mobile list is one that really scratched an itch that I didn't think a mobile game could scratch, and that's the game Outlanders. Has anybody else tried Outlanders?
I played it a little bit at like a Day of the Devs type thing in Chicago, but I haven't seen it in its full glory.
So it is a kind of medieval city building simulator, and it sets you up with these scenarios where you can do kind of a little bit of layout and city planning. And you also can set up these laws for your citizens to follow that tell them things like, here's what your working hours are, work a little harder. I know it'll make you hungry. Or you can tell them, hands off of each other. We don't need any more children in this city and stuff like that. And on top of that, it has a very hands-on kind of somewhat micromanagey approach to city building, where you can assign individual workers to different buildings and follow them during their kind of daily life. The thing that really works for me about Outlanders is I love games that have a slow, relaxing pace that I can kind of play while I'm kind of doing something else. Like, this is the game that I would play while I was doing dishes or while I was getting ready for bed. Because it's on mobile, I can keep an eye on it. But even if you're setting it down for a couple of minutes, it is flat out relaxing to just watch a little guy clear a forest and chop down trees. So super good game. Gets really complex and hard towards the end, but starts off really smooth and easy. All right. Now you've got it, folks. We're down to three games on the Game of the Year list. It's Shane Kelly's top three.
Okay.
Number 3, burning up the charts. It's Sayonara Wild Hearts.
Sayonara Wild Hearts.
Really fucking rocks. It's a album meets game. It's a pure arcade experience, which you guys know I love. It is a candy-coated explosion of different influences and colors. That's literally all I'm gonna say about it. It rules. Everyone should check it out. I'm still listening to the soundtrack.
Yeah, Spotify this year, I was confused because I was like, who are these two Swedish men I've never heard of in my top 5 artists of the year? Oh, wait. They are the authors of Sayonara Wild Hearts. I listened to them so much that they were 2 of my top 5 artists. I also bought a pink bomber jacket that I have worn very often since for me, I think I love the soundtrack more than the game. But I completely understand anyone putting it in the top 5. It rules.
Yeah, I'll also agree in that I put it was just below Ape Out on my list. So yes, definitely good.
For this one, I keep changing what my favorite song on the soundtrack is. Right now, I think it's the song called Mine, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Number 2 on my list, unsurprisingly, Ape Out. Ape Out is an awesome game. I've already talked about it when Raygan brought it up. Honestly, I don't have that much else to say about it, but this game rules. It has a slightly environmental message, but also an anti-human pro-ape message, which I can get behind, I suppose, as well. And just, again, this is... I think the top 3 of my games here all have a certain unique styling involved. They all have a kind of flat color, very living world feel to them. So the top game on my list is perhaps the greatest game of the year, most likely of the decade, perhaps even of all time. That would be, gosh, I hope they come up with a name for this Goose game. The Untitled Goose game is a super you guys have all heard about it. All you listeners know everything there is to know about the Goose game because it's the most memeable game of the year without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And why is it so memeable? It's because it takes something that everyone knows is true, which is that geese are large and somewhat scary, and they bite. And it turns
it's the universal truth that we didn't all know we knew. You know, it's like voice of a generation kind of thing, right? Like,
yes,
you know, just finally someone got up and said it.
Humans, I think, have this knowledge built into their DNA.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at a goose, you know that is a chicken with a snake for a neck, and I don't want to be near it.
That is the
I
thing
don't
we
disagree.
all know. Yeah.
And so in Untitled Goose Game, it is sort of playing on the there's a history of kind of similar games. There's like that goat simulator, right, where it's these Agent of Chaos games that provide you with a sandbox to wreak absolute havoc in. But this one succeeds where similar styles of games have failed by giving you a world that is extremely charismatic and that is stubbornly resistant to the chaos that you're trying to wreak. My favorite thing about the game is the way that you can absolutely trash the garden, and the gardener every time will stomp his feet and get mad, but then get right back to work cleaning up your mess while you make another mess somewhere else. And that is why it is my game of the year. And it's not because the goose is the world's greatest protagonist or perhaps antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because the little English village had so much character and was so jam-packed with story and characterization without ever having to say a word. It is my favorite location in video games. It had some of my favorite open-ended puzzles. It's an incredible game.
Seconded.
Goose Game has so much personality, and I think it is not only a blast to be a mischievous dirtbag of the year. We didn't even talk about it this year because it was so clearly going to be this goose that we were just like, yeah, it's the goose. But I think to me, it's something about the little script font for the tasks you need to complete. Like the goose is organized in his mischievous to-do list, and only that. You bothered to cross things off a very orderly list while you're wreaking havoc. To me, it's the little details. I know that the art style's been memed a lot. Like there's so much stuff to pick up, but like just the idea that you can treat this like a sandbox, or you can get stuff done, and you might accidentally do both at the same time, feels like a good combo of a puzzle game and just a like place to hang out. I think I like games you can hang out in and waste your time a little bit without having to feel like you have to do the thing. That's an ongoing theme in my list, and you'll see it. But I think, Shane, you're right on the money that like it's the small town that makes it. A goose in an urban environment would be a sixth as much fun. That is a scientific amount.
Yes.
1/6.
1/6, approximately one drumstick less. Fun.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I'm thinking about my list here is that another thing that all my top games have in common is a reactive soundtrack. Sayonara Wild Hearts is a game where you are just simply playing the soundtrack, and you know you are playing it out right there. But both Ape Out and Untitled Goose Game have soundtracks that live and breathe and react to your character's movement and actions and things. That's something that I really hope becomes a big element in games. One of my favorite games of last year was the Tetris Effect, and that had the same aspect. I love when video games bring all these different art forms together. Like there's visual art, there's music, there's programming, and game design, and you bring all of that together in a way where each of these parts are bouncing off of and reacting with each other, and that's my favorite thing about video games, and that's my number one.
Absolutely.
Game of the year.
All right, so I'm gonna go through my list with as much fanfare as Shane brought to his list. So Raygan, if you could just edit in Shane doing that little trumpet song or whatever into every time I sing or name a song, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Every time you name a song on your Game of the Year list.
Every time. What did I just say? Every time I name a game, I want it to be underscored by Shane doing whatever it was that he did during his.
While we're still table talking, definitely Raygan's.
That was absolutely in the episode, Laura. Go ahead.
Oh,
Shane.
sorry.
No.
Go ahead, Nate.
So my list coming in at number 5, this already may not perfectly qualify, but I've decided that Celeste Chapter 9 is number 5 for me. Now, I know it's a DLC to an existing game, but it has as much content and as much depth and as much quality as any other game that we've talked about. So the map makes games, now extremely okay games, put a significant amount of thought and effort into the DLC to Celeste, and it was free, and it was incredibly challenging and worth your time if you're a fan of Celeste. So I'm calling that number 5 for me. I don't think anyone else on the show really played it as much, but I absolutely loved it. I think this whole list is going to be me talking about games, or at least several of these are going to be games that I loved because they are horrible for your mental state. But for some reason, they sit well with me. So Celeste Chapter 9, fantastic. Right, exactly what I wanted, more Celeste. Number 4, I have Untitled Goose Game. So we just talked about it. I think this game is, like, the meme is bigger than the game itself at this point. But I loved this game as well. So I won't repeat it, but I this game was great. And probably the one that will be talked about the most from any of our lists. Untitled Goose Game, I think, is going to be a part of meme and video game culture for a long time.
Yeah.
Can I reflect on that just one more time? I do you guys think that the joke, so Untitled Goose Game is a perfect joke in and of itself. Mm-hmm. Do you think that all the memes and stuff around it are gonna spoil that joke?
No.
No. Because the meme is the joke, right? Like, or is the game. It's just an extension of the game. It's like, it's funny to see so one of my favorite ones that came out in the baseball playoffs this year, in a very important game, a baseball player made an error, and someone went in and edited the goose going in and interrupting the player, forcing him to make the error. And so it is crossed over into that world. And like, that is so funny to me because that, like, yeah, it's unlikely that set of circumstances would be in the game, but you can imagine on a notebook, like, interrupt a play or something like that. Interrupt a baseball game would absolutely be on the list. And you'd have to go in and try to time it exactly right to make a baseball player miss a ground ball, is like right in line with the game. So it doesn't even, if you saw that meme and you're like, oh, that looks really funny, and you go and pick up the game, and instead of making a baseball player miss a ground ball, you're going and making a kid, like, have to buy his own airplane back from a store. Like, it's all just the same world, right? So
absolutely, I thought of most of the memes as like the Untitled Goose Game expanded universe or something, right? Like it's
right?
all just about projecting that the same exact feeling of the game into new scenarios or interactions with other characters or whatever, and it almost always works, which I feel is 100% additive. I don't think it takes away from the game.
The thing that I think is magical and what makes all this stuff works and why I was so quick to say no to you, Shane, about the stuff like wearing out the game is that the goose is being memed like side characters normally get memed, but you are playing that goose. Like, normally the breakout characters in games are the like weird side ones, and like the antagonist is kind of this like faceless thing that you get to play. In this game, you are that dickhead goose, so you get to do that stuff. So it's not just a meme of like this side character doing something or like the villain. Like, I couldn't think of a million games when you would be trying to stop the renegade goose and all the creativity the team had would be put onto the goose doing stuff to you. You being the goose is so much more fun that I don't think you can spoil that. Like, I think all the memes in the universe, it's still fun to be the person initiating the pranks. Like, it's still fun to pull the pranks. Like, I think that's the reason why the memes still stay fresh and it's so much more fun, because you get to pretend like it does feel like DLC, like real world DLC for the game.
Yep, I agree completely.
That's a really funny way to put it, and I kind of agree. Yeah, exactly. All right, so my next game is Ape Out. So that was number 3 for me.
I don't think I have anything to add to that conversation, just that I loved this game. So go check out Ape Out if you have not. Now, my next two are two games that we've not discussed yet. So number 2 for me was Cadence of Hyrule. I loved this game, and I love this game for a lot of different reasons. One, this is my soundtrack of the year. This is the I've listened to particularly the Glockenspiel song is
Good.
like perfect. It's perfect. So go if you are a fan of the Necrodancer soundtrack, Danny Baranowski. This is, and you're also a fan of the Zelda games. This is like everything I could have ever wanted. The soundtrack is awesome. So I still listen to it.
Nate, did you hear the DLC just came out?
I did. I haven't picked it up yet, but I haven't started playing it yet, but I am very much into it. And
Let's both dip into that. I can't wait.
Yeah,
me too.
Very much. So I loved the game. I think the game is fun. I think it has the same. It surprisingly feels like a Zelda game, which has both its strengths and its opportunities. Like, by the end of the game, you're so strong that like it's not really a challenge anymore. And I wish that it stayed challenging for longer. But overall, just the fact that this game even exists, that Nintendo let this weird little indie developer make a weird little indie game with its Zelda property, and they made a game that feels like a Zelda game and feels like a Crypt of the Necrodancer game, is a real accomplishment. And I just love that it exists. I think they executed it really, really well. It's fun. It's silly. The songs are all bangers. It's a fantastic game. So absolutely recommend it.
I also adored it, and it's on my list as well. I think what I really loved about it is, like, again, I loved Zelda. I loved Crypt of the Necrodancer more in theory than in practice because I was not good at it. So this game, I know that people have kind of said Cadence is a little too easy for them. I think for me, it was really wonderful because I got to enjoy this music. I got to move on the beat. I got to do puzzles, but I also got to take breaks from time to time, which really helped with that. Like, it felt like this great like tension and release moment where I got to like amp in when I wanted to, do something really hard, step out if I wanted to. And I mean, honestly, it's the first time I've been able to play as Zelda or Cadence, to play as a, not just Link has been really fun personally for me. So I don't know why it took this game to do that, but I just want to give a quick shout out. Like, I played as Zelda the whole time. It didn't affect anything in the story, didn't affect anything except the sprite, but it made me absurdly happy. And God, I played this on a ton of buses, and I think every time I was on a bus, I just like the time was gone. Like the battery died, and I was like, "What happened to the last 3 hours?"
And you missed your stop like 7 times. And you look up, and you're in a dark bus depot, and they're like, "Ma'am,
honestly,
please."
We went to go visit my husband's family, and we were on a bus, and we got stuck outside the tunnel and to get back to New York City for like an hour, and I didn't notice, and I was like, "Oh, it seems like I've been playing this game for a long time. Why aren't we in New York yet?" Justin's like, "The bus has been stopped for 45 minutes, and you didn't notice."
Oh my God.
So like that's how much I liked Cadence of Hyrule.
Wow.
Yeah. It's such a unique experience, and it has characters that we all know and love. And again, feels like a Zelda game, which is such, I think, a hard thing to do if you're not making a Zelda game. So one of the most unique games that happened this year.
I was really hoping that by now we would get the big tell-all just explaining like how this happened, and I don't feel like we've gotten that complete story yet. But I mean, there's still hope. I think it's fascinating that this game even happened, and I love that it did, and I want to see Nintendo do more like this.
They are putting they put Zelda assets in Mario Maker too. So like they're dipping toes into like experimental Zelda stuff. We gotta hope there's more down the road.
Yeah.
What's your
so
number one, Nate?
Yeah, my final game.
What's your big fanfare?
Thank you.
Oh, I wonder what it'll be.
Yeah, I really debated what to put here. And if you're in our Discord, you might have an idea of what this is. But I really wrestled with it more because of how much time and thought and effort I put into this game, and not because of how much I liked it. But it's gotta be Slay the Spire. I feel like this is I'm back in my FTL hole. I'm back just like repeating the same thing over and over and over. But these games, it's what I keep going back to. And so we make a roguelike exception for this show. And I really do think, like, at this point, any one session of Slay the Spire, I'm usually done in under an hour. So I do think it still fits. It's perfect for me, right? For this since it came out, it's been the perfect game for me to, home, kids in bed, and I've got an hour or so before I'm going to go to bed myself. And I just want to play a game that I know and that I'm going to have fun with, and it's going to be challenging, and I'm going to be able to finish all of my commitment to that game in that sitting. And that's what Slay the Spire offers. I can pick it up, start a game within an hour, sometimes 3 minutes. I am like done with my commitment to that game, and I can put it away and it doesn't matter anymore. So that's why I do think it fits really well into our format. Now, have I done that hundreds of times? Yes. Is my total playtime now probably over 100 hours? Yes. Did somehow my daughter miraculously delete my save file, making me get even deeper into this game so that I can make up my lost progress and get past it? Yes. But this game offers a depth that I was not expecting. It blows my mind that it's the same game. There's no the cards don't change, the relics don't change, none of it changes. They just add these slight modifiers to make it more and more challenging. And I'm pretty deep in it at this point. They have this ascension thing that you have to beat the game with. Every time you beat the game, it adds a new modifier that makes it more difficult. Really small stuff on any one individual, like you start with lower HP, or you start with a curse in your hand, or so-and-so creature is tougher. But they stack and they stack and they stack. And the final goal is Ascension level 20. And I want to get to that and beat it. And then I will, I don't know, like bury my Switch in the backyard or something. And I'm at Ascension level 15 and 13 and 12 with the 3 different classes. So I'm getting there. But this game is in my head. I love it. It is absolutely the game that's had the biggest impact on me this year. There's a 4th character coming out at some point. It's in beta if you play on PC. I've not gone into it yet. So I say I'm getting close to being done, and there's going to be another character, and it's going to just, I know what I'm going to be doing. But I love this game. I know it's not for everyone, but it is complex. It is enjoyable. It's difficult, and it is satisfying when you win. So shout out to the few that are still on the Discord that like chat about it with me. If you're out there playing this game and you want to post your decks and your builds and all that and want to talk about them, we still have this conversation going. So I love this game, and it's got to be my number one. It's the game I've spent the most amount of time and thought on this year.
All right. And Laura, it's down to you.
Yeah, so I will confess that I have not only reordered my list many, many times, to the point that I put it in alphabetical order when I initially set up the doc, but I've been reordering as we've been recording, because so many of my games are so different feeling from each other that they're really hard to rank. So this is my top 5 list for now. I will say that Ape Out and Grindstone have been neck and neck for that last spot, because both of them are filling the same spot in my heart. They're that quick, short session game. I mean, I beat Grindstone all the way. Grindstone won because of one particular thing, and that is there is the most ludicrous sound effect when you there's little like king folks that you can collect in levels, and at the end of the level, if you've gotten the king, you tap the king to beat him up, and he gets little bruises, and then you take his crown.
Yes.
And
I feel so bad for that little dude.
And you just beat up this guy, and it's like, and then a crowd of children go, yay!
Yay!
And that yay, every single time, I like for 150 levels, he's not on all 150, but every time I got like ludicrously happy. I laughed like it was funny every time.
That's a really good call out, because that's a really brilliant little choice. I had the same feeling that Shane had, which is that like that moment where you've already beaten the level and then you have to like kill the king
up a guy.
in a kind of a mean way, and it would feel really,
you feel bad,
you feel terrible,
and then the kids cheer, and you're like, that's fantastic.
I know.
Like,
yay! Oh yeah, diffuses what could be a kind of a bummer moment into this cute thing that's very weird. That's some alchemy there.
Right, and I feel like there's so much of those little alchemical moments. I love every time I get to the hippie spear. There's all these little things about Grindstone. It is taking a mechanic that I love, and I've talked about Dungeon Raid a ton, but the thing about this though is there's like winnable levels. So many of these are like endless. How far can you go? How long can you last? This puts that on you. There's like this risk reward, like you're going to lose your stuff if you don't get out. But you don't always have to die. You can win and get your rewards. And I think that alone has made that like a new twist on the genre. So
yeah, I think Grindstone is approaching You Must Build a Boat level for this show, where it's a mobile game that we never actually did an episode on, but we have mentioned for like a
so many times
now.
That we can put it on the list. Like that's why it's we didn't do an official episode, but we have talked about it on the podcast enough that I was like, it's got to get on there. Yeah. Cadence of Hyrule is 4 for all the things I just mentioned, and my getting stuck outside the Lincoln Tunnel, making the time pass. It's a killer soundtrack. 3 is A Short Hike, and I will say that might be, as I said, a little bit of recency bias, but I've been really wanting a game like this year. I've been wanting a game that let me explore, that let me talk to people, where if people were mean, they were kind of, mean for a specific reason, like maybe they're having a bad day, and if you helped them, they would feel better. Like that earnestness was something that I look for in short games, and I look for in the games we cover. There hadn't really been one this year. Goose Game was like sassy, and it had a lot of like good heart, but A Short Hike had this really beautiful loveliness. And plus, again, I love a game where you can take the path they want you to, and it also doesn't penalize you if you literally go sailing off the other direction. It feels so good to just pitch yourself off the mountain and fly. And it's, it reminded me a little bit of like the moment in How to Train Your Dragon when you're flying around like in the clouds. Like there's some really nice moments of peace and stillness in this game. And also like, it's fun to talk to, rabbit running a marathon. It's fun to do little Animal Crossing things. It's this combo of a bunch of stuff I liked, and I think that's what made it so winning for me. It's that Wonder Song mental health break spot where I'm going to stick it higher on the list than other people just because it feels so good to play it. And then I put Untitled Goose Game above it because I am a bad person, and I like being a bad person more than being a good bird. Goose Game is just so much fun. It is a game I love talking about with people. I felt like it expanded outside of the game, so I had to put it pretty high. I thought if you had asked me a week ago, and before I looked back on the list, what would be my game of the year, I'd been like, of course it's Untitled Goose Game. Then I looked at the list and realized this year, Baba Is You came out. And I know I'm the only person who put it on their list in the top 5, but like Baba Is You is one of the most innovative puzzle games I've seen in like ever, because it's taking like physical puzzles and it's taking logic puzzles and it's taking word puzzles. Everything is collapsed. It's like we get the magic circle or the beginner's guide stuff where you're transforming objects. You get all this, but what really, really makes it hit is that each level feels fair because it's a concept you're learning. And once you get that concept, they play on it. But you have to make all these series of logical leaps. And so many puzzle games are, here's a new mechanic I'm going to teach to you. In this game, it's, here's a new mechanic that you're going to kind of uncover. You're going to have to figure it out. You're going to have to make that leap. There's no tutorial. And that graduated gameplay is really what got me. And God, this game is hard. There's definitely haven't beat it, but it feels so good to just sit like side by side with someone and pass the controller back and forth and just rewind. you try it. Oh, no, I see this. Like, very few puzzle games let you think. A lot of puzzle games require you to do and keep trying and keep trying. This one's like, no, figure out what the hell's happening. It's just such a pure new mechanic, new innovation that I had to put it number one. And I just found out it's getting a level designer in 2020, which is going to break everybody's brains. Like, can you imagine being able to make levels for this and share them?
Wild.
Like, can you imagine what people are going to do with it? It just seems crazy.
I don't even know how you go about thinking about making a Baba Is You level in a level creator. I can't think of how this game was even made, let alone like, hey, people, go out there and make a game. But I bet some people are going to do some really cool stuff.
It's just wildly creative. And I just don't understand how so many, they take such simple building blocks and it feels kind of like discovering Tetris. Like, oh, I took something simple and there's so much you can do with it. Like, that's kind of, it feels like such a pure thing that they've tapped into that I had to put it number one.
I think it's a really, really good pick. And it was definitely on my list. I just, the way these rankings are, it's all very, very personal to each of us. But I think it's easily, if we were ranking specifically based on what is the most innovative game of the year, Baba Is You would absolutely have won on, I think, probably all of our lists because it's incredibly innovative. I was going to point people towards a video that so there's a YouTube channel called Game Maker's Toolkit that does a lot of really great analysis of game mechanics and game design. And one of the things they do every year is they don't exactly do a game of the year, but they do an episode at the end of every year on what is the most innovative game of the year, like something brand new to games in that year. And they chose Baba Is You, and they have comments from the developer on the process in creating the levels, like how they went about creating.
Oh, I want to hear that.
And it's a really interesting description of sort of the mental process of sort of working backwards from a solution, trying to find ways to wrinkle it, basically. And it's a really, really interesting one, and I'm very excited to see what people do with the level design tools. I think that's extraordinary. Like, it's such an innovative game, such an incredible game. So yeah, very good pick, Laura. And this leaves us with a really difficult choice to make here. I think if anybody has ideas about how to handle this, I'm open to it. I have a bit of a pitch for a potential game of the year, or rather, I was trying to narrow it down. I don't think there's any way we're getting out of this year with just a single
alive.
Right. Well, we almost didn't, but I think we could narrow it down to maybe two.
Well, I will say Goose Game was a 1 on Shane, 2 on me, and 4 on Nate's.
Yeah,
throwing that out as like a general consensus pick.
We've spent the most time talking about Goose Game, but I do want to hear, Raygan, your pitch.
Yes.
Okay, so here's my pitch. And while I agree, Goose Game is a great game, and it did place very highly on most of our lists. It's also one of the most talked about games of the year. It needs no help from us.
Neither did Firewatch.
No, neither did Firewatch. Neither does anything on our list, really. I mean, who's looking to us?
Doesn't every game really crave the short game bump?
But I think what sticks out to me is, like, when we pick a game of the year, we don't necessarily have to be picking it based solely on like which of us put it where on our personal lists. We are making a statement together as a podcast, and we're making a statement about the types of games that this podcast is about, right? So I have a pitch. Maybe this is the right choice for that, or maybe it's not. Let's talk about it. But here's my pitch. There are two games here. One game that three of us talked about, so roughly the same, I think, as Untitled Goose Game, would be Ape Out. Ape Out was on my list. I think it was somewhere on all of our lists, actually.
I took it off, but it was, yeah.
Well, okay.
It was on there for a while.
Okay, and it was pretty high on most of our lists, and I think it's a really special game. And it's on at least three of our lists, and then on two of our lists is A Short Hike. And I think in this year of 2019, A Short Hike is the most short game that I played. Now, I know that only 2 of us on the podcast here today played it, which handicaps it a bit. I have a feeling that it would have been in the top 5 for those of us who didn't play it if they hadn't. Now, that's not to say that that means it gets extra points, but I think it's an extraordinarily the short game. So I would like to push for that combo because I think it would present the types of games that we want to have as our games of the year. But maybe you guys want to argue with me about it.
If it's not Slay the Spire, I quit the podcast.
All right.
No, and it's funny, like, I love A Short Hike, but I really do think, like, the fact that only 2 of us played it is gonna, like, I feel like Goose Game placed higher on all the lists than Ape Out. So, like, I feel like...
Not mine. I put Goose Game point at number 9. Ape Out was 7.
Sure.
Yeah, here's the problem that I love.
I guess
Goose
that's
Game,
not true.
And Goose Game is on my list, but I will say as a actual game, it's fine. It's more like the mood and the theme and like the meme and all of that is what's bigger than the actual game. Playing the game, it was like, yeah, this is fun.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I disagree. But
we all can have different opinions about that, of course. And I talked about this on the episode, but I'm 100% with you, Nate. I think it's a really, really great joke that is also a decent game. But to me, I placed it below Ape Out for sure, below Sayonara Wild Hearts, because I think those have more of a more game to them. Than Untitled Goose Game did. Goose Game has a lot of fun objectives, and it is a great joke. And I loved it, but I don't know.
But
like
again, that's not like you 2 also placed them lower than Shane and I did.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know. Like I don't think I am kind of, maybe I'm in a camp alone, but I feel like we should just like each put our personal number 1 for the year, because I think it's a personal list kind of year.
All right. I mean, I'm okay with that if that's what we want to do. Do we want to have a year where we put a 4-way split for Game of the Year with Manifold Garden, Untitled Goose
or like
Game,
Raygan's Game of the Year, Shane's Game of the Year,
Baba Is You, and Slay the Spire? Is that our choice for the year? Is a 4-way split?
Or do you guys want to try to do a consensus?
I made my pitch for consensus. I think I lost that argument, but maybe other people have a better one.
We could just call it Baba Slays You on a Hike.
Nice. That was a good one. Wait, did that get everything?
But no, we didn't. No, because Manifold Garden and Goose Game aren't in there, but it was a really good name.
Baba Slays You on a Goose Garden Hike.
Yes, done. 5-way split.
Baba Ape. We have to fix that. There has to be ape in there somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we can put the word out.
Man, we're killing this now.
This is
it's already a
content.
dead joke, so we can leave it where it lies. But how's everybody feeling?
All hail you, Baba, the ape goose.
Yes, I'm leaning more towards this year. We're not crowning a short game of the year. We're saying this has been a wonderful year for games, and has had a divergent. I've said divergent like 8 times now. This has been a wonderful year for games, and I think there are so many developers out there now making such interesting and unique experiences that it is hard for 4 separate people to come together and say this was the best game this year, because there's been a lot of very individual styles, right? There's been a lot of attempts at turning a specific thing into a game, and whether it's Ape Out or Baba Is You or Slay the Spire, there's something for everyone that is great, and I think that is even better than one game of the year. So I say we end this on a high note.
Nate is such a good diplomat, and I love it. I really do, sincerely. Thank you, Nate.
I love it too. Thank you, Nate. I think it's a very 2019 thing for everything to fall apart and there to be total disunity. So,
whoa, that is.
Hey guys, what's that? Do you see something waddling up towards the podcast. What is it? Honk, honk, honk. Oh, guys. Oh, my gosh. It's the Goose.
no.
He's running away with the trophy. Honk, honk. Goose Game wins it all.
Oh, man. Damn it. Right when we were coming together. That damn Goose.
That damn Goose. Well, so what I'm hearing from all of you is Outer Wilds wins it. That's fine, and we'll move on.
That's fair.
So I'm fine with that. I think I'm going to list this when we have our official page on the topic with 4 picks for 4 hosts, and I'm happy with that outcome.
I hope our server can handle all the fans of all 4 of these games going to just... we got to have a comment board. We got to have everything because this is going to be some spicy content.
Yes.
I'm worried about the fan base being able to handle this.
If you're a fan of a game that's not Goose Game and you want to wrestle the trophy, the short game trophy, back from the Goose, you can do that in our Discord.
The Goose is holding the trophy next to a plaque that says 4 awards for 4 games. And the sheep is just, Baba is just eating grass next to the sheep.
There we go.
Next to that goose.
So before we wrap this whole thing up, I know a few of us had a few little things we wanted to talk about that were either long games of our year or other things we wanted to briefly note before we wrapped up. And I also have some short game picks from some of our listeners that I would like to share with all of you. Some folks on our Discord shared them with us. So, Shane, I think you had something you wanted to talk about.
I did. So we have not traditionally awarded a special trophy for long games, but this has been a year where we've had a lot of games that I really, really wanted to play, even though they were long, or were just like right on the cusp. Like one of my favorite games, of course, we've already brought up a couple of times, is The Outer Wilds, which is just a hair too long for us to consider it a short game, given our traditions. I really lobbied hard for us to consider it a short game and include it on the list, because what are the podcast police going to come and tell me that game is too long?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we came up with a specific short game of the year anyway. So, hey, I say throw it in. But
there it is. So I wanted to talk about how great The Outer Wilds was. My long games of the year are number 1, Outer Wilds. Number 2, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, which I'm still playing and it still rules.
No argument for me there.
And number 3, Control.
Yes, Control was awesome. And kind of a big surprise because I didn't really like other games from that developer. I tried Alan Wake and kind of bounced off it. But Control is awesome. And I don't want to spend any time really talking about it on this episode because Shane and I recorded a little mini episode specifically about Control right after we played it, which has now been a couple of weeks ago because I'm slow on editing. But I'm going to be releasing that next week. So this bit of a programming note here is that next week being the holidays is going to be an off week for the podcast. But if you are a Patreon supporter, you will be getting an episode of the show next week. It may be a little rough because it is just me and Shane talking about Control. But if you're interested in hearing Shane and I talk about one of the best long games of the year, support us on Patreon. And if you're not, I mean, hey, now is a great time to do that. If you support us on Patreon, patreon.com/theshortgame for even $1 a month, which is not very much, folks, that gets you into our Discord where you can tell us what your favorite short games of the year are, or chat with us about what you're playing. That's where we plan episodes and we talk to our listeners about what we're playing. And it's a very good time. We love having folks there. Thank you to everyone who joined us there in 2019. And we'll be starting to have some patron-only content. I don't want to erect a massive paywall, but this will be sort of special extra content like Shane and I talking about a long game like Control. And if you're interested in hearing that stuff, please join us there.
I kind of already thought you released the Control episode to our patrons, and I was wondering why no one had come and talked to me about it.
It's because I mean, it's hard to edit one of these things a week, guys.
I can't wait to talk to people about Control.
And there are already full-length episodes on 2 of our medium to long games that were disqualified, Heaven's Vault and Outer Wilds, because Heaven's Vault would have been my number 1 probably.
Yeah.
but it's also long.
Yeah,
so.
would have been on my top
It's a
5
good year for
as
games.
well, as I think I already mentioned.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good year for
Very good
those
game.
medium games.
Hey, if we get enough patrons, and this is a promise, we all quit our jobs and we have the short game, the long game, the medium game, just
The board
then-
game.
the board game.
The 15 minutes or less game.
Yep. If that's the kind of content you crave, we are here to get you a whole
throw
case.
money
The
at
short
us.
film.
Money to support 4 people, 3 of whom have kids and 1 who lives in New York City. That much money. We'll quit all our jobs.
Yeah, that's a promise to you, listener.
That's a promise.
We'll
you
take
can,
you to
or
dinner.
you can contribute a small amount and get all of the wonderful benefits that I already
And get your
mentioned.
friends.
So
Get your
thank you,
friends.
listeners, for your patronage in 2019, and we thank all of you.
This year, you probably bought like a $20 present for like a cousin that you didn't really want to, right? You felt obligated. Take it back. $1 a
Go
month.
return it. There's still time, depending on when you're listening to this. And on the topic of our wonderful listeners, I did want to include, we polled some of our listeners for their short games of the year. This was on our Discord, and I wanted to read some of the responses from them because some of them were games that either we didn't get to play or that we we played but didn't get to do an episode on, or that for whatever other reason didn't get featured. And I wanted to call some of these out because they were great. And thank you so much to all of our listeners who sent this stuff in. Jeremiah, a huge friend of the show, said that Tangle Tower and What the Golf were his short games of the year, and obviously Fire Emblem Three Houses for a very long game of the year. Both good choices. What the Golf is amazing. We didn't do an
Yes.
episode on it, but it's super great.
I've talked about it a couple times.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that game.
And I've been running into some technical issues trying to play Tangle Tower, but I intend to get back to it. Hopefully there'll be some bug fixes by the time that I do. Joe B on the Discord says, my short game of the year is Slay the Spire. So Nate, you paid him off. He says, I beat it in a little over an hour. And 60 additional hours into the PS4 version, he says. He says he didn't play a ton of short games this year, but Grindstone and What the Golf also get mentions from him, as well as Apex Legends. So also good picks. I played a fair amount of Apex Legends this year too, but that's not my style of game, so I fell off
Yeah,
it pretty
rules.
quickly. But it's good for the sort of thing that it is, and I recommend it. Good friend of the show, Mark Bramhill, says that his game of the year was A Short Hike. His other games on his list were Untitled, Goose Game, Sayonara Wild Hearts, and Card of Darkness, which we haven't talked about on the show, but maybe we should because some of us have played it, and maybe we were going to kind of save it for an Apple Arcade episode. But Card of Darkness, very interesting game on Apple Arcade. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce this one. Is it Ardia Abe?
That sounds right.
Sounds right to
Yes.
me. Ardia Abe from the Discord. This is a bad year for new games for me, which is usually how I roll, says Ardia Abe. My favorite short games were Untitled Goose Game. I loved that it was one joke with great punchline. Nearly all of that game was a joy and was fun to play with my wife watching. Gato Roboto was number 2. It's an easy breezy Metroid with a charming 2-bit pixel graphics. And he says also, if I can sneak it in, Link to the Past Randomizer got its V3.1 update. And I love the randomizer so much. It's become my new sport. With the fall tournament ongoing, I have a ton to watch. So Gato Roboto didn't get on my list for whatever reason. Honestly, I'm now thinking maybe I should have put it there because it was
I know.
absolutely great. This is how that stuff works, right?
Yeah.
What's that French phrase for it? Something about staircases and coming. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I feel the same. And I think Gato Roboto really was a great game. I didn't feel it was like truly innovative because it is basically a retread of Metroidvania stuff, but shrunk in miniature. But how often do you get a miniature Metroidvania? It was really something.
Yeah.
And finally, Hacksaw Unit, a friend of the show, wrote to say his number 1 was Hypnospace Outlaw. Man, I wish I had made time for Hypnospace Outlaw before the end of the year. It's one of those games that.
It seems like your game.
Oh man.
Yeah, we should have done that game.
Is it a pinball game?
No. He says, part adventure game, part virtual OS. It's both amazing to browse around and to puzzle out. I found the story and the smaller mini stories within to be compelling. Definitely worth a play. And then number 2 for him, Slay the Spire. Really caught me by surprise. Very, very good.
Yeah.
Not really much to say that hasn't already been said. It's a very good dungeon crawler card game. And then
See, the people get it.
they do. And his number 3 on his list was Combo Postage. Haha, just kidding. Well, our listener, Hacksaw Unit, is a game developer and sent me a copy of his game that he released this year, Combo Postage. And it rules. I took way longer than I should have to get around to playing it. And there's a certain feeling sometimes somebody sends you a game that they developed and is like, hey, check out my game. And, you want to be polite or what have you. I did not need to be polite about this. I honestly should have gotten to play it sooner. It's a fantastic game. I don't know if we'll be covering it in any way on the show specifically, but I can 100% without reservation say that Combo Postage rules. It is a Windows-based sort of puzzle platformer, I guess, is the best. It's action puzzle platformer, I guess. And it's one of those games that I have booted up for a short session literally every time I have booted my computer over to Windows since I installed the game. I've been trying to beat my high scores at it and having a fantastic time. So I feel a little bit potentially, I don't know, conflict of interest-y recommending the game because it was sent to me by one of our patrons who is literally sending me money. But with that said, this game was a huge surprise for me, and I really, really, really like it, even if it is a game by someone who literally sends me money once a month. So thank you so much to all of our supporters on Patreon, and specifically to these supporters who sent in their Game of the Year picks. And if you have Game of the Year picks, we would love to hear from you on our Discord. Let us know there. Well, this episode has been too long for us to share a what's making us happy this week here at the end. So I'll just say what's making me happy this week is the coming holidays and all of you. Thank you to all of my co-hosts and to all of our listeners and to everyone out there. Happy holidays. We're going to be taking a week off next week. Once again, like I said, if you're really jonesing for something to listen to over the holidays, there will be that patron-only episode out pretty soon that I mentioned. I am Raygan Kelly. You can find me on Twitter at RayganK. That's RayGanK. And of course, you can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net or at _shortgame on Twitter or www.patreon.com/theshortgame. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
And Nate, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at NateSTL.
And Shane, where can people find you?
I'm extremely on Twitter at 8BitShane.
And listeners, we hope that you'll join us again in 2020 on The Short Game.